Okay. Hi, everybody. This is our last check-in. So welcome to it. It's April 30th. How's it going, everybody? Are you taking finals yet? Or are they just on the heart? You're taking them now? I hope you're getting enough sleep. Hope you're hydrating. Um, So I've only got a couple of things on the agenda. The main thing I think we should talk about today is like your presentation to a GitLab audience tomorrow. Any questions you have about that, things we can give you advice on. But I just wanted to say at the top, great job in the mock grooming session. I think you had really smart questions. You had good answers to their questions. I hope that it was good feedback for you. I think everybody involved enjoyed it and thought it was good. So great job. I also just want to mention that we did put together some retro questions to share with you that you can like kind of answer us about async. I don't know that we finalized it. We all took a look at it and made some edits, but I think maybe we could say like today we'll share that with you. But I think the main meat of today's call, let's talk about your presentation tomorrow and any questions you have, things you want to bounce off of us, whatever. Oh, also any other agenda items that you have. Sorry, we can talk about whatever you need to talk about, but I figured that's probably the main thing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for setting up the grooming as well. Like we got a lot of like really good feedback and like we did make some like edits to our final prototype based on that. So like
Cool.
it was really good to do the grooming. Um in terms of updates, Linda did push back a lot of our deadlines because we have like so many things due. For this capstone. So the testing results, we're currently working on that right now, which is due Friday, but we're planning to get it done like really soon. And the presentation, we have it put together already. We haven't practiced it yet, but we wanted to get feedback from you guys about like maybe the flow or like the information we should reduce or like add more. In terms of the presentation, for Linda, it's supposed to be 15 minutes with 5 minutes for Q&A. So that's what we're planning to do for tomorrow as well. We can share with you guys our presentation and do like a brief like run through and then like just feel free to like pause us at any time. Um, I can share that right now.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds great. 15 minutes and five
Yeah,
minutes for Q&A.
yeah.
That's, I mean, I guess she's the only one doing Q&A in your presentation. Is that right? Or are there other people as well?
There's gonna
So it's her and like everyone else in the class, and you guys are also welcome to join.
5 minutes is that's like one question.
Yeah.
All right.
There's also like four or five like other groups that are doing in like the 2 hour block. So we only have like 20 minutes per group.
Mm.
I can share my screen with you guys.
If you want, I can time this. I don't know if that is helpful to you. Oh, but I guess if we're gonna like interrupt you, then it would like the timing won't really be accurate, but
Yeah, and we also haven't like done like a run through in our team, so we're not sure if it's gonna be over. But yeah, um, so this is our final presentation, and this is our team slide. Um, we'll introduce with the problem. So developers waste a lot of time with and risk misalignment when onboarding to issues because it's really long and there's a lot of information to read through. And our overarching goal is to streamline how users onboard onto issues. So first we validated the problem. So how do developers onboard onto GitLab issues and what are their main pain points? Throughout discovery research, we interviewed 10 participants, 8 being internal and 2 being external users, who are mostly developers to understand their workflow and how they onboard onto issues. For this one, I'm not sure if we have to block out the participants face in terms of NDA and like privacy, but
that's a good question. I don't know if you have to. It's probably polite to. Um,
mhm.
if you want, you could like instead of just like a pink box. You could put like a black box with the like, Apple default user logo kind of thing, almost like they're like, those like, well, maybe you don't because you're all young, but there were like, shows in the 90s where it was like they would like interview someone and they were just like a shadow kind of thing and their voice was like covered by a box kind of thing. Um, that maybe if you
Yeah.
wanted to hide them. Yeah, I don't know if like legally or whatever you have to, but it's probably nice to.
Okay. Yeah. And the key takeaways from our user interviews is that it can take either a couple minutes or like many days to fully understand the issue, depending on the complexity. There's many hyperlinks, and when the user needs more context, they have to go through many previous issues in order to fully understand. The pain point is that when this project description is not updated, it's really hard for the user to onboard onto the issue, and gathering all of those contexts is very time consuming. So here's our persona, main target persona, which is mostly developers who are in like either big or small companies, and their their goal is to quickly onboard into issues so that they can resolve the issue sooner. We also drew a journey about how they onboard onto the issue, whereas when they're getting pinged, understanding the context, reading the information, and mostly setting an asynchronous meeting because they don't have enough information in order to onboard onto the issue.
And then we're gonna move on to talking about narrowing down our scope. So our first point of talking is going to be just our general affinity mapping findings. So we kind of bucketed our findings into three sections. One problem being navigation. So navigation specifically between links, code files, other issues, and even just people to get questions answered from. There's also the bucket of lacking context. So this context can be coming in when you're trying to get familiar with the issue. So figuring out whether the issue where the issue lies in the context of like the broader goals of the company or of the quarter, and varying quality of description or the description not containing enough information. And the third bucket would be just too much information. So the long scrolling format or having the discussion threads being really long. And this led us to our general kind of ideas of our how might we's. Specifically, we felt that we could put improvements in four different sections. So one being the organization of information, two being communication of different information, the third one being kind of the status and priority of the specific issue, and then four being a reduction in cognitive load. And all of these four sections had different little features that we felt that we could come up with, or there were different pain points that we felt we could address. But all in all, we felt that it led us to two very specific kind of paths forward, which would be one, how might we make it easier for developers to see the most relevant discussion comments? So this first, how might we focuses on the problem of lengthy discussion threads? And two, how might we improve the process of understanding the relationships between ancestors, child items, and linked items and epics? So this, how might we would address the problem of navigating between different issue pages? And so our initial kind of ideation process was to create crazy eights, and we each individually provided different ideas, but we felt that the two ideas that are broad ideas themed on were our first concept being the pinning feature, and our second concept being the linked tree diagram, which we'll walk through specifically in the next slide. So going through this pinned feature, you can see here the pin feature is on top. You can edit and delete, and then clicking on the pin will take you scrolling down to the specific comment that's being pinned. And this is for both comments. So this feature will help users stay updated with the most relevant discussions. And then moving on to our second concept is the link tree diagram. You can see it's located near the list of other related issues. And this just provides a visual. And so clicking on the issue bubble kind of takes you to that page of the actual issue. It's also color coded by different epics and different types of issues. And overall, it just gives a visual of the list view of all the different items. One particular, though, difference is that it does include the epics, which the current list doesn't include. And I guess like before we move on to like the actual concept section, like for flow, the narrowing down scope, was there anywhere like kind of like too much information or maybe like more information to discuss? Because I definitely tried to like keep it like succinct or like when I think about like communicating everything, it's like succinct, but I'm also thinking like to someone who doesn't know our whole process, you know?
It is a lot of information.
Yeah.
But like a lot of it is like it's important to show the process, you know. Um, I think that if you want to keep someone who doesn't know anything about this and hasn't been along for this and maybe doesn't really know much about the product hooked, you might want to make the reason you need to narrow your scope down more, not exactly urgent, but like set up
Mhm.
a little bit more like we had these two like really different ways of going and we needed to figure out what we were going to do. So here's the stuff we did. Like kind of set up like we had a problem. Here's how we solved it. Here's what the solution was. Um, because I think that your first narrowing down scope slide doesn't necessarily communicate like we were stuck at a fork in the road and needed to figure out which way to go. And I think
Mhm.
if you lean more into like we needed to figure out one or the other, that maybe makes the user go, uh-huh, interesting. They're about to explain how they solved a problem as opposed to just like they're just talking about process.
Mhm. Okay. No, yeah, that definitely makes sense.
One other thing you could mention, just for those who are not familiar with this project specifically with Tufts, is mentioning the timeline that you have and how that impacts narrowing down the scope.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is like this is a very time boxed thing. You might even want to say at the start of it, like how much time you had for the entire project just to kind of set the table at like the beginning of the presentation as well. Um, but that also does it kind of like it turns up the heat a little bit on the like we had to pick a direction. So how do we do
Mhm.
that? Here's what we did.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really good idea. We should have a timeline.
Mhm. And then I guess like also had a specific question on like talking about the features. I don't know, was the like specific points, I feel like enough communication of like, oh, this is what these features are, kind of like explaining them.
I think so. I don't know. I feel like you'd get better
Yeah,
feedback about that from someone who hasn't been along for the
for
whole
sure.
thing.
Yeah.
Um, I think in general, reducing the number of words you have on slides, but still saying the same stuff you're saying is probably going to help because if the only words the person is seeing is like the core of the concept you want to get along, like it's not even a grammatical sentence. It's just like,
Hmm.
user pins important comments versus like user can see tree of, whatever. Um, I think that might help them like kind of pin it in their memory. And like you're still explaining all of it, but like if they're like kind of zoning out a little bit, they'll just get that little bit instead of like seeing like sentences and they're like, I don't feel like reading that sentence,
Hmm.
you know.
Okay, for sure.
So after we created, oh wait, could you go back to it? Yeah. So after we created our prototypes, we conducted our first round of user testing, and it was a concept test between the discussion and then the link tree diagram. And we had 5 participants, 2 internal, 3 external, and screen for developers, mostly developers who are familiar with GitLab issues. And through this round, we really started to understand the users' impressions of our 2 design concepts. For our testing results, so for the first half, for our testing results, 3 out of 3 chose the pin feature, and they rated it easier to find and more immediately useful to them compared to the link tree feature. And they appreciated the way it reduced time in terms of sifting through the discussion thread. And a general finding was that users found the link tree diagram visually helpful, but less effective in practice, particularly with large projects with lots of different issues, and the tree visualization could be overwhelming. And there is currently a way to find linked items in GitLab. However, there's not a way to pin comments in GitLab. So they found the pin feature to be more useful. And things to explore. They mentioned the placement of the pinning feature in terms of where to place on the page, the pin feature, how to navigate to the pin feature, and then information displayed within the pin, and lastly, staying consistent with the GitLab design system. So based on our first round of concept tests, we did some UI fixes. So for example, in the main section, we initially had these red pins and a see more. Some users felt that the red pins didn't really match the GitLab design system because it's like the issue descriptions and like linked items are usually in black and white. So we made those into gray pins. And lastly, for see more, people were expecting see more to mean that the comment would expand, but instead our intention was for once you click on it, for it to scroll down to where the actual comment is. And so we got rid of that wording. And lastly, for the main section, we added these tags because users felt like it could be useful to know who a little bit more about who commented, for example, if they're a developer or a designer. And same thing for the sidebar, we changed the pins from red to gray. Another thing for the main section that we switched is that in our first round, we had the pin feature up on the top, and people felt that it wasn't exactly the right placing because they like to go to the project description first to read up on a project, and the comments were blocking that. And so we moved the pins to after the project description and right before the linked items. And lastly, for the sidebar, one thing that users said they didn't enjoy about the sidebar is that it only shows the title, and they felt like they're missing more content in terms of the actual comments. And so we added the comments in our second version. And so after these fixes, we started our round 2 of A/B usability testing. We had 5 participants, 2 internal and 3 external. Again, there were developers who were familiar with GitLab issues, and we were testing the main view versus the sidebar. So these were our testing results for round 2. The main finding for here was that participants liked the main section for its in-depth content, but the side navigation for easier navigation between the comments. And in our interviews, we asked them 2 questions and had them rate them on a Likert scale from 1 to 5. One about how easy it was to interpret the information, and then a second on how they think they would impact, how the feature would impact their efficiency. So for in terms of interpreting information, 4 out of 5 chose the average rating for the Likert scale was 4 out of 5. And then for impact on efficiency, the average was the sidebar layout. And so, okay. And here are some of the major quotes from round 2 testing. One participant said that sorry, I have not read these quotes yet. Basically saying that the pin was useful in terms of gaining more context of the issue, and that it was easier to like find where the most relevant discussions were. And yeah, go ahead.
And after that, we had a mock grooming with the GitLab team in order to get feedback on our current functionality, which are 4 functionalities: creating a pin, removing existing pins, editing the pins, and limiting the number of pins. And we got some really good technical feedback in terms of how it might be more complex to pin parts of the common, and there are some edge cases that we need to consider, such as missing the error states or the functionality to share or view permissions and pin status when the original comment is edited. And with the feedback from our technical team and also the design team, with the product designers and design manager, we iterated on our final design. And this is the final design with the 3 main functionalities. First is creating a pin. So when the user scroll down to a comment, they can pin the whole comment. This is from our feedback that pinning a part of the comment would be more complex. So we prioritize pinning just the whole comment. And when the user click on the title, they can be prompted to the session where the comment was mentioned. And when they can also edit the title or unpin the comment if it is not relevant anymore. Next one. And this will be some edge cases that we consider, but I haven't replaced the video, but I'll talk about the edge cases like reaching the maximum number of pin, and then the second is cannot pin due to the technical performance, as we got the feedback from the technical team. And this is the slide we talk about the future directions, such as first further functionalities like sharing the pin comments, and second is accessibility. So in terms of the interaction and the hover state and how we can accommodate for screen readers, and lastly is AI integration, since many users mentioned that AI would be helpful in providing summaries of the comment or description for them. And these are some reflections like importance of iterations, complexity of the system, designing research, and adhering to design systems. I should probably reduce the text on the screen. And next, a appreciation slide. And yeah, that is the end of our presentation.
I just realized while like running through the slides, I feel like we didn't really talk about how we changed our design from between round 2 and the grooming section, because we the round 2 findings were like there were like good parts and bad parts to both, and I feel like we kind of combined the two in terms of easier navigation and then also like more context. And then another thing I'd like to ask is, like, and this is something we were discussing yesterday, is like for round one, like halfway through, like only the first three were really concept tests, and then like the last two, we like switched to like testing the layout of like main section versus sidebar. And so we kind of combined those two into round two, like in our slides. But I don't know what your guys' thought on that is. Like, do you think it flowed well, or?
I think so. This presentation, I think, is a very different. It's a different thing than any of the things you've done so far in the project, because the thing you're doing here is you're telling the story of the project. And I think you've got all the information that you need for that in your slides, but the story is a little bit muddled. I'm getting a lot of information. I'm not getting story time. You know what I mean? And I think that the audience is not going to care that part of round one you tested concept and then part of round two you were testing whatever. They're going to care about what were you trying to do? What steps did you take to do it? I think a little bit of like meta narrative maybe about the project would help a lot with making sure that an audience that wasn't along with you for this whole journey will understand the story, understand why it was important that you took the steps you took, and kind of understand at a high level what steps you took. Um, I think if you showed this presentation to someone like an outside person at this point and then said, how many rounds of testing did they do? I'm not sure they would know. I think they would get what the final feature was. But like trying to tell a little bit more like in a way, you almost kind of want to make this like a like what's up followers, here's my YouTube vlog of this project I did kind of thing, is like sort of what this presentation wants to be. Like make us care about why you did what you did. So I think like if you're talking about like round one of user testing, what were you trying to learn? Like at a high level, what did you do? Show me a visual of a thing you showed them. I like the little like screenshot you took of one of the interviews. You're like bringing me as a participant or as an audience member in this presentation into your process. I think that's really what it is. This whole exercise is all storytelling. It's all creating verisimilitude. It's all bringing me as the audience member into your process, like I'm there along with you. Um, this is much less a like lab report kind of thing. That's the written materials. That's fine. This is like, here's what we did. And then like you want like a big reveal of your like final prototype at the end. You know what I mean? You want to kind of like Steve Jobs it up a little bit and be like, so, all these things we told you, all these things we just showed you us learning, all this feedback that we gathered, like we brought it all together and here it is, and like I think you want to have like no slide for that part, you know what I mean? Just like here's the prototype. I'm clicking around, I'm doing it. Like, isn't this great? Isn't this a great experience? Don't you want to be using this kind of thing? Like basically don't sweat the details, I guess, is what I mean to say here. The details exist in written stuff. The details really happened. You've got it all written down and recorded and stuff. This is more like telling the story.
Yeah, definitely adding like more storytelling to slides.
And I think there are a couple of concrete examples I can give about that, is if you go back to the key takeaway slide from I think your first round of testing. No, it's even further back. It says key takeaways as the heading.
I think after that one, and oh,
Right.
okay. Wait, I'll try to find it.
I don't think we have one.
Oh yeah. But I do think it was probably like 19, the
Like,
testing
Oh,
results.
there was
Maybe.
it was shortly after the part where you had the screenshot of the interview.
Oh.
Mm.
Oh,
Yeah. This part. There's a lot of words. Sorry, key takeaways is one section in it. There's a lot of words here. I think you don't need these to be like full grammatical sentences. Like key takeaways, I think could each just be like basically a noun phrase.
mhm.
Like instead of it can take any time from a couple minutes to days for users to fully understand issues, like you can condense that down a lot to like a couple of words. I think also like there are many hyperlinks and ancestral links, so users need to find more context. Um, I think you can condense that down as well, just because like I don't think you need to change what you say out loud, but giving the user just like really boiled down, condensed text symbols that they can like hook onto while you're talking, that will be like the one nugget you want them to take away from the thing you're saying when you're showing that slide will help keep people focused and bring people along and make sure that they are taking in the information that you want them to take in visually, because someone will kind of glaze over this and won't read all of that text while you're talking.
To save time with this too, instead of like, I know for me at least, I try to wordsmith a ton and it takes me more time to think about how to condense it than writing it in the first place. You could use AI, like, I don't know if you're allowed to use ChatGPT or we use Claude, but very helpful in these situations.
Oh, that's true. In an academic context, it could get you in trouble to do such a thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
maybe.
But if you have like if you have an Apple device, you could like copy and paste this into like notes and like tell notes to like summarize it or something like that. Because you're not asking it to generate information, you're not like using it to cheat. You know what I mean? But also like, you know, it's not that hard to boil this down. Just take like the noun part. Another thing kind of about the meta narrative, I'm not exactly sure where this would fit in. Maybe, can you show me four? Actually, sorry, could you scroll up a little bit in the sidebar just so I can see what the other ones before four are? Yeah, okay. So I think that probably between two and three would be an okay place for this. Just some sort of like really high level table of contents that's like, here are the big sections I'm about to show you to set up the expectation with the user with the audience member about here are the chapters of this that are about to happen. And then every time you go to a new chapter, they'll be like, I remember that being mentioned. And maybe even on those chapter heading slides, give some sort of context of which chapter out of how many you're on, you know, almost not exactly a progress bar, but like making it clear, like really holding the audience member's hand about like, here's where we are in this presentation. Remember I told you we're going to do, it's like, you know, in an academic paper, it's always like, I'm going to tell you this. I am telling you this. Here's what I have told you. It's exactly the same sort of exercise here.
Mhm.
Even highly intelligent university students actually need an incredible amount of babying and handholding to pay attention and get the details that you want from a presentation. And that actually, the need for that only increases when you get into the business world, because like people have a lot of things going on. They're multitasking during meetings. Like you only get like a little sliver of people's attention.
I know you mentioned like in terms of like setting up the concept test, like focus telling a little bit more about the story in terms of oh like we're facing so many different decisions and then the way we chose to solve that was to do a concept test. Like do you have any other areas in the presentation where we should like insert something more like that? Like
I
some
think that
key points.
the part about UI fixes, I think it's very good to have a section for that. I think that you can phrase that a little bit differently. Because I do think that like kind of the thing you want to emphasize is the very smart decisions that you made about what to do and the very smart way that you did those things successfully is like the overall, the like implicit story you want everyone to take away from this presentation. And I think the UI fixes section is a great place to, it's a good example of this. Like, instead of saying UI fixes, talk about it more like the way that you iterated on feedback you got from participants, and like participants gave us all of these different pieces of feedback. It was like, a lot of perspectives we hadn't thought about before. And so we synthesized it into, these improvements in whatever. And then, you can talk about ways that those made it more successful, like ways that you observed it being more successful. I don't necessarily know that you've actually had the opportunity to do enough rounds of testing to like see results from all of the iterations that you've made, but I think telling the story of like, each chapter is basically like, we had to do this. How did we do it? We did it like that. We chose to do it this way for this reason. And here's a little visual of that. Here's you coming along with us on that journey. And it worked. Here's the result of it. But then we had to do this.
And in terms of storytelling, do you have any sort of suggestions or techniques you may be familiar with?
Something that I've done before is like, this is honestly much harder when it's a group project because you have to do it collaboratively. I find this kind of thing much easier if I could just do it myself, which is like not good advice to give you. But like, if you imagine explaining this whole project to your grandmother, I think that gives you a good baseline. It's like, she's not here with you on this journey. She may not, I don't know. You're young enough that you may actually have grandmothers who work in tech. But like, like a grandparent or like an older relative or like, a 10-year-old or whatever, someone who like is really removed from this context. If you wanted them to understand at a high level, like what this was, why it was worth your time, why it was successful for you. I think that can be a good kind of exercise for like really narrowing down to like, what do I actually need to communicate about this?
I mean, I do the same, and I think storytelling is also very important. Like, for example, like when you're looking for a new job at some point, and then you'll need to prepare your portfolio, and like it is really similar. Like we don't need to show every details, but we have to make sure that like, okay, like here's the design process that I think it's good. So you have to consider the audience. I think like I also use like similar like suggestions from chat. Like I always think of like, okay, this is the presentation for my mom. So let's say they don't have any context around tech. So how I should approach to this. So I think the another practical thing you can do, I'm not so sure if you have those time, but you can also check out with, I don't know, like other students who have no idea like in the tech. And then you can also like give it a shot, and if it is good enough to go, or maybe you need to modify the content a little bit, but I think only if you have time.
Very small detail that I have a question about is like if you go to slide 26, 26 with like the Likert scale.
Mm-hmm.
Like we presented it as like an average, and I know like you're not like technically supposed to average Likert scales, so I don't know if that's something like that really, yeah, I don't know what your thoughts on.
Well, so I also had a comment about this slide in the notes. The main findings, if I look away and look at this slide for 1 second and then look away again, I don't know what your main findings are because your main findings are written as a sentence. So try to give me like one big, easily digestible thing that like will make it clear to hear. But also, like, I think the Likert scale doesn't help you tell the story. and use it in the way that helps you tell the story, you know? So like, I think the story here is like you got greater than 3 on these things. I don't really, I know why I think, if I think about it, because I was along for the project, why sidebar layout and main section are like a little bit grayed out, and they're also closer to 3. But like, what is the way these are laid out and the way that color and contrast are used? I think you're trying to convey something. It's not super clear at like a quick glance what it is. I think what you're trying to say is like, actually, what are you trying to say?
Like
You got
we're
2 different.
yeah, we're trying to say that like in terms of the main layout, people like that it was like in-depth and content. But they liked the sidebar for like being able to navigate quickly between the comments. And so that's why for our next iteration, we kind of combine those two aspects of yeah.
I see.
Oh, yeah. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I was just gonna say I had to look at this for a bit and then talk about it out loud to realize that you're comparing 2 different main section scores and 2 different sidebar layout scores. At first, it kind of just looks like you've got 4 different things you're talking about, and some of them are grayed out for some reason, and some of them are highlighted for some reason. If you want to kind of make a visualization of the main finding, and I think part of this is also like if you can boil that main finding down to like maybe there's 2 bullet points that have like, you know, as few words as possible in them or something. If you want to make a visualization of this, you know, you don't necessarily need to use these Likert scale data for the visualization. Like you can have like a traditional like balance beam scale of the 2 features and or something, you know, and you could say like, you know, based on Likert scale questions in our whatever. Like just I think that when you said it out loud and you basically just said the sentence that you have in the main findings, it makes sense. It makes me go, I see, I know what you're doing now with the visualization, but the visualization I think doesn't explain itself. It like if I look at it for 1 second, I don't really know what I looked at.
Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just the way that you summarized it, Delia, is how I would put it on the slide, and I would make the actual numbers that you collected from the scale. I would put way less emphasis on that. You can still include them if you want to be able to show that data, but I like almost put it as like parentheses thing, not as the main thing. Because right now, like Chad said, because of the color and the um whatever the other word you said, Chad, the contrast being used, it's like showing up as the most important stuff.
Just like a quick question, like what do you guys think about if we had, for example, like this slide, the 2 pictures of like each feature and then just like highlighting like what they liked and then what they preferred. Would that like over clutter the slide, or do you think just like a quick like sentence or like phrase would be better?
Yeah, like if you don't even need, I think, these 2 boxes. Like if you literally just had like screenshot of main section, screenshot of sidebar, and underneath each of them had like 1 line of text, and like underneath main section it was like, you know, like good contextual information, and underneath sidebar it was like efficient for navigating, and that was like
Mhm.
it. I think that
Yeah.
might make it clear to, especially if earlier you've used, so you have to use the same screenshot I think from 25, and maybe in 25 you can like label them A and B and then echo like have them labeled A and B again in 26 just to make it like as clear as possible, like here's the handrail to hold on to. You're not going to fall off the edge of this, like you are following along whether you like it or not, audience member.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah, the number the number of ideas per slide that you can get across is like surprisingly low if you want people to follow fully. Oh, that reminds me, something I didn't write down, but the like table of contents kind of chapter, here's the chapters, whatever that you do at the beginning. I think you have to do it at the end as well. Probably maybe before you kind of say like, and here's, here's the like, here's the full, like, let me live click through the full final prototype kind of thing. You might want to basically say, because like you're giving like, I've just showed you the whole progression. Here's my Pilgrim's Progress. I just showed you like how we figured out what problem to solve, how we figured out, what way to solve it, how we iterated on the feedback that we got from people along the way, how we collected technical expertise and iterated on that. And here's the result. I think you need to like, there's like a little bit of showmanship to that, like, remember what I just told you? I'm going to tell you what I just told you. And the audience will be nodding in their head, like, yeah, you did just tell me those things. I agree that you have achieved those things. I think the technical term for this is ekphrasis. It's like a communication that's just about communicate. It's like meta communication. I might not be pronouncing that right. I've only read it. Also, to
We
circle
were
back
also,
to, oh, sorry. Go
oh,
ahead.
sorry.
I was going to say to circle back
Yeah,
to what Sunjung said about like communicating stuff for a portfolio. That is this also. I'm sure you're aware of this, but like think about ways that you can make this presentation also be something that the four of you can just take and like also present in a job interview. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. I just wanted to ask, like, do you guys think we were debating whether we should have like a slide on the mock grooming? Um, do you think it's useful, or because I think mock grooming is like really like unique to our team. Like I don't think any other team did that. But
Mhm.
also like I don't know if like having it would like or
I
just like
I
kind
think
of
it's good
including that
to
in the
have it.
results.
I think you should change a little bit about what you're doing with it. I think it's important to make the audience know who you were getting feedback from, and it's important to say why this was done. I think it's helpful that this is like a unique thing. Um, like I think the story is like we figured out what problem to solve by talking to real users. We like tweaked and adjusted our solution by talking to real users. And then once we thought it was in a pretty good place, we went to the people who actually build this product and talked to them about how we would really implement it and got feedback from them on that perspective. I think that's a really valuable thing to do. I think that it makes you look smart that you got that done. Um, and I think talking about the way that you absorbed and integrated that feedback into your process is also makes you look very successful. So I think it's great to have. I think it's maybe more than one slide. I think it's like a short section with like 2 or 3 slides. It's like why we did a mock grooming, uh, who we talked to, what they said. You don't have to use the term mock grooming for this. I don't know if you need to explain that or you know what I mean? Like that's a term that we used for it. Um, but maybe it's also a good way of like there might be some way to make this into like a story hook for the audience as well, like explaining what mock grooming is or like what the goal of this was or whatever.
And then I don't know if there are any, or like I'm obviously like if there are more notes for the rest of the presentation um to discuss, but I was also wondering like compared to for tomorrow's GitLab group presentation, Like, is the 15 minutes still okay? Because I mean, I'm assuming I think what we have the full like 45 or
Yeah, we've got 50 minutes. I am not worried about filling the time. I think that if you shoot for 15 minutes for the presentation, that's totally fine. It'll take a little more than 15 minutes and that'll be okay. Then we've got, let's call it 30 minutes for people to ask questions. I don't know if we'll take that full 30 minutes, but it's okay if we don't. I do think that if enough folks who find this interesting show up and do ask questions, then we might actually take the full 30 minutes. We might get all the way to the end of our time. But even if it's like you do the presentation and then there's like 5 or 10 minutes of questions, that's fine. Like don't worry about filling the time. The time will always get filled. And if we end up ending early, no one's going to be mad about that.
Question in terms of like the goal of tomorrow's dry run, like, is it more feedback on, the actual designs, or is it more feedback on how we're presenting this, like kind of what we're doing today? Like this is how it can improve your presentation for our final.
Well, I mean, I think I'd flip that question back on you. What's your goal from it? My expectation is that you're going to get to practice your presentation, and more people who are not us and the folks who joined us from mock grooming will see this and ask you questions about it and give you feedback. You don't have like a ton of time to iterate on stuff after that, but like, I think to me, at a baseline, if you just get the chance to like run through your practice again, and then maybe they have some feedback on the specific slides, that's great. But like, what do you want to get out of it? What's most important for you all?
Yeah, I feel like at this point in time, maybe on more of how we're presenting the information, and then in terms of feedback on the designs, maybe it's like, oh, like future iterations, we could do this or something like that.
One thing we could do is have is there an agenda for that
Not yet.
tomorrow?
I'm gonna make one.
Yeah, we could, something we do at GitLab, which is also a good learning just for when you're asking for feedback in the future, is we could add those two things or whatever additional things that the rest of you come up with that you want to receive after you present. We can add them to the agenda. When you're more specific with the feedback that you want to get, you'll actually get that feedback. So we could add those into the agenda ahead of time.
I will say don't approach tomorrow's presentation the way that we talked about the slides today. Like pretend it's the real deal. Treat it as a dress rehearsal. But I think that it's a good recommendation to like tell me what kind of feedback you want to get from them. I'll put that into the agenda. GitLab has a pretty healthy like live notes doc going on during the call kind of culture. So I'm hoping that I can get people to like write in questions and stuff. I'll also mention it at the start of that call, like we've got an agenda, please add your questions as we go, sort of thing.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Sort of off topic, but one of the first things I noticed when you started presenting was the font that you're using, and I really like it. So I'm just wondering, what are you using? It looks like there's two different fonts for titles versus other information.
Yeah, it's actually a template. Um, I can check right now.
Little plug for Figma slides.
Yeah.
Yeah, the M serif display and um the body is DM Sans.
Thank you.
Uh, Dasha, Sanja, Gina, any other comments, things you wrote down on the notes that we haven't talked about that you want to make sure we talk about? Oh, did we lose Dasha? I think she had to jump off.
I don't have anything else.
Okay. Anybody have anything else?
I won't be there tomorrow, unfortunately, because I have my presentation for my study as well. Yeah, it's just like literally on the same time. So I also have to prepare for my presentation. So sorry about that. But I know you'll do a great job. We'll live the recording, right?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna record it for sure.
Okay. So I can watch it later.
Yeah.
Check. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, no, no. I was just gonna say, yeah, I want to as much of our check-in process as we can. I want to record and put on that YouTube playlist because I think hopefully these will also be useful assets for the four of you later. Okay, it sounds like we're good for today. Good luck for tomorrow. I mean, I'll be there, but good luck in advance in like your preparation for it. I'm sure it will be great. Let me know like if you have any kind of specific stuff you want me to put into the agenda doc for tomorrow about the sort of feedback that you would like people to give you, and I'll put that in there. And I think we should be good to go. You're so close to the finish line on this.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you,
Super
guys.
helpful.
Thank you.
See ya.
Good job.
Thank
See
you.
you.